Blood dripped from Tessa's split lip onto the dusty ground as she stumbled through the tall prairie grass, her torn dress catching on thorns with each desperate step. The thundering hoofbeats behind her had finally faded, but her heart still hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. She pressed her hand against the deep bruise spreading across her cheek. The one Barnaby Wickham had left as his parting gift before she'd escaped his clutches. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead, and her bare feet were raw and bleeding from running across the rough terrain. She'd been fleeing for hours. Maybe days' time had blurred into one endless nightmare since she'd broken free from Wickham's ranch, where he'd held her captive for 3 weeks. Her water had run out that morning, and now her tongue felt like leather in her mouth. A shadow fell across her path, and she looked up to see a man on horseback silhouetted against the blazing sky. Panic shot through her veins as she tried to run again, but her legs gave out, sending her crashing to the earth. "How is he?" "There, miss." The voice was deep, gentle, nothing like Wickham's cruel snarl. "I ain't gonna hurt you." Levi Cordwright dismounted in one fluid motion, his weathered hands raised peacefully as he approached the trembling woman. He'd been tracking wild horses for 3 days when he'd spotted her stumbling across the open range like a wounded deer. Up close, the sight made his jaw clench with rage-purple bruises painted her delicate face. Her corn-silk hair was matted with blood, and her emerald dress hung in tatters. "Who did this to you?" His voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. But his touch was feather-light as he helped her sit up. Tessa flinched at his proximity, her wild blue eyes darting around like she expected attackers to emerge from every shadow. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming and dehydration. "Don't take me back to him." "Back to who?" Levi pulled his canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. "Drink slow now." She gulped the water, greedily, some of it spilling down her chin. "Barnaby Wickham. He said I belonged to him now. Said my daddy's gambling debts made me his property." Leva's hand moved instinctively to the Colt .45 at his hip. He knew Wickham by reputation, a wealthy rancher who collected beautiful things like trophies, and wasn't particular about how he acquired them. The man had been buying up land and people's debts all across the territory, using both to expand his twisted empire. "You're safe now," Levi said firmly, shrugging out of his leather jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Wickham won't lay another finger on you, I guarantee it." Something in his tone made Tessa look up at him properly for the first time. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and steel-gray eyes that held both kindness and danger in equal measure. Dark hair was longer than fashionable, curling slightly at his collar, and a thin scar ran from his left temple to his jawline. "Why would you help me?" she asked, studying his rugged face. "You don't even know me." Levi lifted her effortlessly into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. "Name's Levi Cordwright, and I reckon any enemy of Wickham's is a friend of mine." He settled her gently onto his horse before swinging up behind her. "I've got a cabin about an hour's ride from here. You can rest up, get your strength back." As they rode across the endless prairie, Tessa found herself leaning back against Levi's solid chest, feeling safer than she had in weeks. She didn't know this mysterious cowboy, but something told her she could trust him. Behind them, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, but for the first time since her nightmare began, Tessa felt like she might actually survive. The cabin materialized from the golden prairie like something from a dream, modest but well-built. With a wide porch and smoke curling lazily from the stone chimney, wildflowers grew in cheerful clusters around the foundation, and a small vegetable garden stretched along the eastern wall. It was the kind of place Tessa had imagined in her most hopeful fantasies, back when hope hadn't been beaten out of her. "Ain't much," Levi said as he helped her down from the horse, his strong hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "But it's mine. Now it's yours too, for as long as you need it." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. Handmade furniture filled the single-room, a sturdy table, 2 chairs, and a bed covered with a colorful quilt. Books lined a shelf near the window, and the smell of coffee and wood smoke made the space feel like home. Levi busied himself stoking the fire while Tessa perched nervously on the edge of a chair, still clutching his jacket around her shoulders. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted quietly. Wickham burned down my family's farm after Daddy died. Said the land was payment for what was owed. Then you'll stay here. Levy's tone brooked no argument. I'll ride into town tomorrow. Get you some proper clothes and supplies. Can't repay you, Tessa protested, her cheeks flushing with shame. I don't have any money, and I don't know when I'll be able to. Did I ask for payment? Levi interrupted, turning to face her with those penetrating gray eyes. A woman in trouble deserves help. No questions asked. It's just common decency. That night, Levi insisted she take the bed while he made do with blankets on the floor. Tessa lay awake listening to his steady breathing, marveling at this strange turn of fate. 3 days ago, she'd been Wickham's prisoner, convinced she'd never escape his cruel hands. Now she was safe in the home of a man who asked for nothing in return. Over the following days, they fell into an easy routine. Levi would leave at dawn to work his small herd of cattle, returning at sunset with stories of his day and whatever supplies the cabin needed. Tessa gradually took over the cooking and cleaning, grateful for ways to contribute. Her bruises began to fade from purple to yellow, and the haunted look slowly left her eyes. You're a fine cook, Levi said one evening, savoring the beef stew she'd prepared. Been eating nothing but beans and hardtack for so long, I'd forgotten what real food tasted like. No, Mama taught me, Tessa replied, a wistful smile crossing her face. She always said the way to show love was through a good meal shared with people who mattered. Their eyes met across the table, and something electric passed between them. Levi was the first to look away, suddenly fascinated by his coffee cup. Tell me about your family, he said softly. Tessa's expression grew sad. Daddy was a dreamer, always chasing the next big opportunity. Mama died of fever when I was 16, and after that, Daddy couldn't seem to find his footing. He started gambling, drinking too much. When he died last year, I discovered he'd lost everything: the farm, the livestock, even the clothes on our backs. That's when Wickham came calling. He showed up 3 days after the funeral with papers saying Daddy owed him $5,000. When I couldn't pay, he said I'd work it off at his ranch. Tessa's hands trembled as she set down her fork. But it wasn't work he wanted from me. Levi's jaw tightened, and his hand moved instinctively toward his gun. He won't touch you again. I promise you that. That night, as Tessa lay in bed listening to the coyotes howling in the distance, she found herself thinking about the man sleeping on the floor nearby. Levi Cordwright was unlike any man she'd ever known, gentle but strong, protective without being possessive. She was falling in love with him, she realized with a start. The thought should have terrified her after what she'd endured. But instead, it filled her with a warm glow of hope. Outside, unknown to either of them, a pair of eyes watched the cabin from the shadows. Barnaby Wickham had finally tracked down his escaped prize. He wasn't about to let some two-bit cowboy stand between him and what he considered his property. 3 weeks into her stay at the cabin, Tessa was hanging laundry on the line when she heard the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. Her heart leaped into her throat had Wickham finally found her. But the rider who emerged from the dust cloud was Levi, and he wasn't alone. Tessa called out, his voice tight with concern. Get inside, now. She rushed toward the cabin as Levi dismounted, followed by a grizzled older man she didn't recognize. The stranger had kind eyes, but worry lines etched deep around them. This is Doc Henley, Levi explained quickly, ushering them both inside. He's got news from town we need to hear. Doc Henley removed his hat, revealing silver hair that hadn't seen a barber in months. Miss, I'm afraid Wickham's been asking questions about you in Millbrook, offering a reward for information about your whereabouts. Tessa's knees went weak, and Levi caught her elbow to steady her. How much of a reward, she asked, though she dreaded the answer. $50 to anyone who spots you. 102. Anyone who brings you back alive? Doc Henley's expression was grim. That's more money than most folks in these parts see in a year. Then we'll leave, Levi said immediately. Head west, maybe to California. No, Tessa shook her head firmly. I won't let you abandon your life because of me. This is your home. Your land, I'll go alone. Like hell you will. Levi's voice carried a fierce protectiveness that made her heart race. We're in this together now. Doc Henley cleared his throat awkwardly. There might be another way. Wickham's claim on her is based on her father's debt, right? Well, what if that debt was transferred to someone else? What do you mean? Tessa asked. If you were married, legally your husband would be responsible for any debts you inherited. Wickham couldn't touch you, then you'd belong to your husband, not him. The silence that followed was deafening. Tessa felt heat rise in her cheeks. As she realized what the doctor was suggesting, marriage to Levi, the man who'd saved her, sheltered her, made her feel alive again for the first time in years. It would just be on paper, Levi said quickly, though his eyes never left her face. To protect you from Wickham? Nothing more? Unless you wanted it to be. Their gazes locked, and Tessa saw the depth of feeling he'd been trying to hide. The same emotions she'd been battling herself were reflected in those steel gray. Ease, desire, tenderness, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. I need to think about it, she whispered. That evening, after Doc Henley had ridden back to town with promises to keep their location secret, Tessa and Levi sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. You two know, Levi said quietly, that I care about you. More than I should, probably, but I'd never pressure you into something you don't want. Tessa turned to study his profile, admiring the strong line of his jaw and the way the fading light caught in his dark hair. What if I do want it? Not just the protection, but everything that comes with it. He faced her then, hope and desire warring in his expression. Then I'd be the luckiest man in the territory. She reached for his hand, marveling at how perfectly her fingers fit between his. Levi Cordwright, are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to let me take care of you for the rest of your life, he replied, bringing her hand to his lips. To let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. Tears pricked at her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. Yes, she breathed. Yes, to all of it. He pulled her into his arms then. And their first kiss was everything she'd dreamed it would, but gentle, but passionate. Full of promise for the future they'd build together. As the stars began to appear overhead, Tessa felt truly free for the first time in her life. But their moment of happiness was short-lived. In the distance, the sound of multiple horses approaching made them both freeze. Wickham had found them at last. Levi was on his feet in an instant, his hand moving to the gun at his hip as 5 riders emerged from the darkness. Barnaby Wickham led the group, his cruel face twisted into a triumphant smile. He was a big man, soft around the middle from too much good living. But the 4 men riding with him were lean and dangerous hired guns who killed for money and asked no questions. Well, Wickham drawled, his voice carrying the cultured accent of someone who considered himself above the common folk. Miss Tessa Marlowe, you've led me quite a chase. Tessa pressed herself against Levi's back, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. I don't know you anything, she called out. Surprised by the strength in her own voice, Wickham laughed, a sound like glass breaking. Your father's debts say otherwise. $5,000 plus interest. That makes it $6,000 now, and climbing every day you've been away from my ranch. She's not going anywhere with you, Levi said quietly, but his words carried across the yard with deadly certainty. In fact, she doesn't owe you a cent anymore. Oh, Wickham's eyebrows rose mockingly. And why is that, cowboy? Because she's my wife now. Levi's lie came smoothly, backed by the kind of confidence that made men believe him. As of this afternoon, any debts she inherited became mine. And I don't recall owing you anything, Wickham. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Wickham's face. That's impossible. There's no preacher within 50 miles of here. Doc? Henley's ordained, Levi replied coolly. Has been for 20 years. The marriage is legal and binding. Wickham's face darkened with rage. You can't steal what belongs to me. She belongs to herself, Levi snapped, his patience finally fraying. And if you had any sense, you'd ride away now while you still can. One of Wickham's hired guns, a scarred man with dead eyes, leaned forward in his saddle. Want me to take care of this, boss? 1 bullet, and your property problem is solved? No, Wickham said slowly, his cruel mind working. Want her alive? Kill the cowboy if you have to, but I want the girl brought back unharmed. I have plans for her. The gunman's hand moved toward his weapon, but Levi was faster. His Colt .45 appeared in his hand like magic, the barrel aimed directly at the scarred man's chest. I wouldn't, if I were you. 5 against 1 ain't good. Odds, cowboy, another gunman taunted. Maybe not, Levi agreed. But I guarantee the first 2 of you who draw will be dead before you clear leather. The question is, which 2 of you want to die tonight? The hired guns exchanged uncertain glances. They were killers, but they weren't stupid. The cowboy had the look of a man who'd faced death before and wasn't impressed by it. Tessa stepped out from behind Levi, her chin raised defiantly despite her fear. I'll never go back to you, Wickham. I'd rather die first. That can be arranged. Wickham snarled, his composure finally cracking. If I can't have you, nobody can. He started to reach for his own gun, but the sound of multiple rifles being cocked from the darkness around the cabin made everyone freeze. Doc Henley emerged from behind the woodshed, his rifle trained on Wickham, while 3 other men stepped. Out from various hiding spots neighbors, Levi had sent word to earlier. Seems the odds just got a little more even, Levi observed calmly, never wavering in his aim. Wickham's face went pale as he realized he was outgunned and surrounded. His hired killers were already backing their horses away, unwilling to die. For someone else's obsession, this isn't over, Wickham promised, his voice shaking with fury. I'll find another way. She'll be mine eventually. No, said a new voice from the darkness. She won't. Sheriff Caleb Torino rode into the circle of lamplight, his badge glinting on his vest. Behind him came 2 deputies, their weapons drawn and ready. Barnaby Wickham, the sheriff announced formally. You're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder. Boys, take him in. As the deputies moved to surround Wickham and his remaining men, the rancher's eyes burned with hatred as they fixed on Tessa. You think this is finished? I have friends, influence. I'll be free in a week, and when I am, when you are. You'll face me, Levi interrupted, his voice carrying a promise of death. And unlike tonight, there won't be any law around to protect you. The threat hung in the air like smoke as Wickham was led away in shackles. His dreams of possession shattered, but his thirst for revenge stronger than ever. 3 days later, the same group gathered in front of the cabin under very different circumstances. Doc Henley stood before Levi and Tessa, a genuine smile creasing his weathered face as he prepared to perform a real wedding ceremony. Sheriff Torino and several neighbors had stayed to witness the union, while Tessa wore a simple blue dress that one of the neighbor women had brought as a wedding gift. Levi told me about the lie you both maintained to save your life, Doc Henley said quietly to Tessa before the ceremony began. But there's no pressure here, child. If you want to wait or if you don't want to marry at all, that's your choice. Wickham's locked up tight, and his debts have no legal standing now that we've looked into them properly. Tessa glanced at Levi, who was adjusting his collar nervously. He'd made it clear that the choice was entirely hers. He'd protect her regardless of whether they married. Though she could see in his eyes how much he hoped she'd choose to become his wife in truth. I want this, she said firmly. Not because I have to, but because I love him. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. When Levi slipped a plain gold band onto her finger, one he'd ridden into town to buy that very morning, Tessa felt tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. This was nothing like the nightmare union Wickham had tried to force on her. This was choice, love, and the promise of a future built together. You may kiss your bride, Doc Henley announced with a grin. Levi cupped Tessa's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her happy tears. Mrs. Cordright, he murmured, before capturing her lips in a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. The small crowd cheered, and Sheriff Torino stepped forward to shake Levi's hand. Congratulations to you both, and don't worry about Wickham Eve. Got word that federal marshals are interested in his land-grabbing schemes. He won't be bothering anyone for a very long time. As the sun set and their guests departed, Levi and Tessa found themselves alone on their wedding night. Suddenly shy with each other despite the weeks they'd spent sharing the small cabin. Are you sure about this? Levi asked softly, his hands gentle as they traced the line of her jaw. "No, I don't want you to feel pressured just because we're married now." In response, Tessa began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly with nervous excitement. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she whispered. "I love you, Levi Cordwright. I want to be your wife in every way." Their wedding night was everything Tessa had dreamed love could be: tender, passionate, and filled with whispered promises for their future. Levi was infinitely patient, erasing the last shadows of fear that Wickham had left in her heart, and replacing them with wonder at the pleasure two people could share. Afterward, they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Tessa's head pillowed on Levi's chest as she listened to his steady heartbeat. "I have something for you," Levi said, reaching for the bedside table. He pulled out an official-looking document and handed it to her. By lamplight, Tessa read the deed to the cabin and the surrounding land. Her maiden name had been crossed out and replaced with her married name in Levi's careful handwriting. "Yours now, too," he explained. "Everything I have, I want to share with you. This cabin, this land, it's our home now, not just mine." Tessa felt fresh tears threaten as she studied the deed. Her name, Tessa Cordwright, looked so right, written there in black ink. After losing everything when her father died, she had a home again. More than that, she had a partner who saw her as an equal, not property to be owned. "Thank you," she whispered, kissing his chest. "For everything. For saving me, protecting me, loving me." "Thank you," he replied, "for choosing me. For staying. For making this place feel like a real home, instead of just somewhere to sleep." Outside, the prairie wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the promise of seasons to come. Inside their cabin, the newlyweds held each other close and planned their future together, the crops they'd plant, the children they hoped to raise, the life they'd build side by side. But danger still lurked in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Wickham might be imprisoned, but his wealth and connections reached far beyond the county jail. Some men would rather destroy what they couldn't possess than let it find happiness elsewhere. 2 months into their marriage, Tessa was hanging, clothes on the line, when she noticed a stranger watching the cabin from a distant ridge. He sat motionless on his horse for nearly an hour before disappearing into the hills, leaving her with an uneasy feeling she couldn't shake. When Levi returned from checking the cattle, she told him about the mysterious observer. His expression immediately grew serious, and he spent the rest of the evening cleaning his weapons and checking the cabin's defenses. "You think it's connected to Wickham?" Tessa asked, though she already knew the answer. "Could be. Word came from town yesterday that he made bail despite the federal charges. Seems he's got friends in high places after all." Levi's jaw tightened as he loaded cartridges into his rifle. Sheriff Torino sent word to be careful. Their fears proved justified 3 days later when Doc Henley arrived with grave news. "Wickham's hired himself a new kind of help," he announced without preamble. "Professional killers from back east, the kind who make problems disappear permanent-like." Tessa's hand went instinctively to her throat. "How many?" "2, that we know of. Brothers named Kane and Abel Morrison, and before you ask, yes. They think they're clever with those names. They've got a reputation from Kansas to California for never leaving a job unfinished." Levi set down his coffee cup with deliberate calm. "What do they look like?" "Big men, both of them. Kane's got a scar running ear to ear across his throat. Someone tried to cut it once and failed. Abel's missing 2 fingers on his left hand from a dynamite accident. They dress like gentlemen, but kill like rabid animals." That night, Levi made a decision that Tessa protested bitterly. "You're not sleeping on the floor anymore," she argued. "We're married now, and married couples face troubles together." "These aren't ordinary troubles," Levi replied firmly. "These men will come at night when they think we're most vulnerable. I need to be able to move fast if they breach the cabin." For 3 weeks, they lived in a state of constant tension. Levi never left the cabin without his weapons, and Tessa learned to shoot both pistol and rifle with deadly accuracy. They took turns standing watch at night, and every sound made them both jump. The attack came on a moonless night in late October. Tessa was on watch duty, peering through the cabins. Single window when she spotted movement near the woodshed. Two massive shadows detached themselves from the darkness and began advancing on the cabin with professional precision. She shook Levi awake without making a sound, and he was instantly alert. Together, they took positions on opposite sides of the room, their weapons trained on the door and window. "Cord right," a voice called from outside, cultured, educated, but with an undertone of violence that made Tessa's skin crawl. "We've come for the woman. Send her out, and we'll make your death quick." "Go to hell," Levi replied conversationally. A bullet shattered the window, spraying glass across the floor. Tessa returned fire immediately, her shot punching through the wooden wall where she'd seen the muzzle flash. Grunt of pain told her she'd found her target. "You winged Cain?" Abel Morrison shouted, and now his voice carried genuine anger. "Nobody shoots my brother and lives to tell about it." "Act!" The cabin erupted in gunfire as both Morrison brothers opened up with their weapons. Bullets thudded into the thick log walls, while Levi and Tessa took turns returning fire whenever they spotted an opportunity. "They're trying to pin us down," Levi observed during a brief lull, "probably waiting for us to run out of ammunition." Tessa checked her cartridge belt. "Got maybe 20 rounds left." "Same here." Levi's mind was working furiously. "There's another way out of this, but you're not going to like it." Before Tessa could ask what he meant, Levi was moving. He threw open the cabin door and charged outside, his rifle barking as he laid down covering fire. It was a suicide run, designed to draw the killer's attention away from the cabin and away from his wife. "Levi, no." Tessa screamed, but he was already gone into the darkness. The gunfire outside intensified. Tessa heard Levi's voice shouting challenges at the Morrison brothers, leading them away from the cabin. She had to help him somehow, but charging into the firefight would only get them both killed. Then she remembered the root cellar. There was a tunnel Levi had dug from the cellar to the barn, originally meant for storing vegetables, but perfect for moving unseen. If she could get behind the killers, ... Tessa grabbed her rifle and disappeared through the cellar's trapdoor. Praying she could reach her husband before it was too late, Tessa crawled through the narrow tunnel, her heart pounding as the sound of gunfire echoed above her. The tunnel seemed endless in the darkness, but finally she felt the wooden ladder that led up to the barn. She climbed carefully, pushed open the trapdoor, and found herself behind the very men who were trying to murder her husband. Through the barn's open door, she could see the deadly game playing out in the yard. Levi had taken cover behind the water trough, while one of the Morrison brothers, the one with the scarred throat, was advancing on his position with methodical precision. The other brother was flanking around the side of the cabin, clearly intending to catch Levi in crossfire. Tessa raised her rifle, drew a bead on the flanking killer, and squeezed the trigger. The shot took Abel Morrison in the back, spinning him around before he collapsed face first in the dirt. His brother Cain whirled at the sound, giving Levi the opening he needed. Both men fired simultaneously. Cain's bullet whined harmlessly, past Levi's head, but Levi's shot found its mark dead center in the killer's chest. Cain Morrison staggered backward, looked down at the spreading crimson stain on his shirt, and fell beside his brother. In the sudden silence that followed, Tessa and Levi ran toward each other across the moonlit yard. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing with relief that they'd both survived. "It's over," Levi whispered into her hair. "It's finally over." But their celebration was premature. From the darkness near the cabin came the slow, deliberate sound of clapping hands. Barnaby Wickham stepped into the lamplight, a derringer in his manicured hand and madness glittering in his eyes. "Excellent shooting, both of you," he said conversationally, "though I must say, you've cost me a great deal of money." The Morrison brothers commanded quite a premium for their services. "Wickham." Levi started to raise his rifle, but the rancher's gun was already trained on Tessa's heart. Ah. Drop your weapons, both of you. I'd hate for my hand to slip and accidentally kill my future bride." "Future bride?" Tessa's voice shook with anger and disgust. "I'm married, you madman." "Widows remarry all the time," Wickham replied, with a cold smile. "And you're about to become a widow very shortly." Levi slowly lowered his rifle, his mind racing for some way to turn the tables. Wickham was too far away to rush, and one twitch of his finger would end Tessa's life. "You know," Wickham continued in that same reasonable tone, "if you'd just been sensible from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary. Your father owed me money, which made you mine by right. Whole romantic fantasy could have been avoided." "My father never owed you anything," Tessa said suddenly, realization dawning in her voice. "Those papers were forgeries, weren't they? That's why the federal marshals are interested in you. You've been using fake debts to steal land and people all across the territory." Wickham's smile faltered slightly. "Clever girl. Yes, the documents were ... creatively interpreted, but legal or not, they serve their purpose, and soon you'll serve yours as my wife." "Never," Tessa spat. "I'd rather die than let you touch me." "Oh, my dear," Wickham chuckled darkly. "Death isn't on the menu tonight. But for your cowboy husband, it most certainly is." He swung the Derringer toward Levi, but in that instant, Tessa threw herself sideways, spoiling his aim. The little gun barked, its bullet going wide. Levi dove for his dropped rifle. Wickham cursed and tried to bring his weapon back to bear, but Tessa was already moving. She tackled him around the legs, sending them both crashing to the ground. The Derringer flew from his grip and skittered away into the darkness. "You little wildcat," Wickham snarled, his hands closing around Tessa's throat. "I'll teach you proper submission." But before he could tighten his grip, Levi's rifle but crashed into the side of his skull. Wickham collapsed, unconscious. His threat finally ended. Dawn was breaking over the prairie when Sheriff Torino arrived with a posse, drawn by reports of gunfire. They found Wickham tied up and ready for transport, while Levi and Tessa sat on their porch sharing coffee and watching the sunrise. "Federal marshals will be real interested in questioning him," the sheriff observed, looking down at the unconscious rancher. "Seems he's been running confidence games across 3 territories. What about us?" Tessa asked. "Will there be charges for killing the Morrison brothers?" Sheriff Torino snorted. "Self-defense, pure and simple. Besides, those 2 had bounties on their heads in 4 states. You folks did the world a favor." After the law departed with their prisoner, Levi and Tessa finally found themselves truly alone for the first time since their wedding. The cabin was scarred by bullet holes and the yard was torn up from the fight, but they were alive, free, and together. "So, Mrs. Cordwright," Levi said, pulling his wife close as they surveyed their battle-damaged home, "what do you think? Ready to start rebuilding?" Tessa looked at the cabin that had become her sanctuary, then at the man who'd given her everything: love, protection, a home, and most importantly, the freedom to choose her own destiny. The morning sun painted the prairie in shades of gold and promise, and she could envision their future spreading out before them like the endless grass. "With you?" she replied, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. "I'm ready for anything." And as the sun rose fully into the clear Montana sky, Levi and Tessa Cordwright began the first day of the rest of their lives, together, scarred by their battles but stronger for having survived them, bound not by debt or ownership, but by love freely given and joyfully received. Their cabin would be rebuilt, their land would prosper, and their children would grow up hearing the story of how a cowboy named Levi found a woman named Tessa, bruised and broken, gave her his name,